Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning if you're listening in the morning time.
Yes, just though primarily good evening, I think, being...
This is the Monday evening podcast from the Two Mats, brought to you by the subscribers of the New European newspaper.
Great people.
Yeah, and we're going to talk... It's been quite an eventful day today.
It has, and it's sort of morphed, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But when it started, we thought we were going to be doing one thing, and we will.
Yes.
But it has been eclipsed and absorbed into... something, I think, bigger.
And, there are two things. One is, and they're related. They're very related.
Totally related, yeah.
And in fact, I think what's really interesting is how they are related.
Yes.
But the first thing is Keir Starmer's speech this morning about artificial intelligence and how it's going to transform
UCL in London. Yep.
It's going to transform our lives and transform the economy. And the second thing is the predicament Rachel Reeves finds herself in
on the economy,
because, as we say in the show notes, the economy is proving stubbornly resistant to Labour's enthusiasm.
Yes,
and it's
awkward of it.
Which is very, very naughty of the economy.
Very naughty.
But it won't pay attention.
In order to splice those things together from the off, shall we have the man himself in his self-driving car crash of a speech answering a question from Beth Rigby about the AI speech and its connection to the problems of the economy?
Yeah.
My big criticism of the last government over 14 years that we had flat growth, and that's why we're taking all these measures to drive growth in our economy. And some of these measures, necessarily planning, energy, industrial strategy, they're all measures that we're taking in addition to everything that we've done in the budget in relation to this. So that's how I see AI powering us forward in that regard. And I think it can do so quickly.
In that little answer is contained the whole, I think. Mm-hmm. So should we kick off with the AI component, if you like?
Keir Starmer's presented AI as though it's something that is particular to what, if you take the analogy of the internet, right, and if you cast your minds back to the advent of the internet, 1995, 96, 97, and people getting very excited about how the internet would transform everything and being absolutely right about it, but having no clue how, and being utterly naive about how it would transform everything, and being totally oblivious to the decimation that the internet would wreak across huge sectors of our lives.
Absolutely. And also, as if artificial intelligence has been the subject of debate since Alan Turing. This is not a new debate.
Yeah.
But Keir Starmer was discussing it today, and he was unveiling a government plan which, to sort of acquit the innocent, had been drawn up by an extremely good person called Matt Clifford, who's an
excellent guy,
a venture capitalist, entrepreneur,
hugely highly rated,
very highly rated, and I've come across him over the years. He's one of the good guys. He has been all over the exactly what you mentioned, Matt. The kind of social, cultural, educational, economic implications of technology, AI, social media, everything for decades now. Yeah. So let's make it clear, Matt Clifford is not the person to blame. But Keir Starmer's speech reminded me of, I don't know if you remember one of the guys who was on That's Live called Chris Searle. He used to do a program in the early 80s called The Computer Program. Or
That's
something,
right, he did.
Right?
Yeah.
In which he would say occasionally, and if you think this is going to happen tomorrow, I've got something to tell you. It's happening today, right? And it was always this sense in which, and this was when the BBC personal computer was being pumped out, and people still thought programmable calculators were amazing and digital watches were really amazing. And the way Keir Starmer talked about AI was, first of all, as if it was one thing, and also as if it was this new and external thing.
Yes.
A bit like a car arriving in front of your house.
A discrete object.
A discrete object. That's a much better way of putting it. And it became very clear to me, as I think it did to you, judging by the messages we were exchanging during the speech, that he really has no idea what it is and has a vague sort of osmotic sense that it's very important and he should sound enthused by it. But the things he talked about, he started off, to be fair, with a good example of how it had been put to medical use.
Can I just make a point? And people may think this is a very callous point to make, right? And I feel, obviously, massive sympathy and best wishes to whoever it was who was the stroke victim that he launched off on this revolution with.
Yes.
Right, but if you're doing a big announcement about the future and how bright it's going to be, don't talk about someone who's just had and go into massive detail about a stroke victim.
Yes.
Because all I was thinking was, what a perfect analogy for this economy.
Yes.
You know, we're like a country who's suffered a stroke.
Yes, although both sides aren't working, so it doesn't quite work. And most of the examples that he presented revealed embarrassingly how little he knows about it. So the one that was just spectacularly pootish was that it could help with locating potholes, which really was John Major's traffic cones hotline reheated, wasn't it? But also, and then he said this in subsequent interviews, you know, talking about how, it'll help doctors because the AI will be able to take notes.
Yeah.
And then this stuff that was being pushed out by the government that it will. I mean, you mentioned to me that teachers will be able to save.
So there's an AI teaching assistant called Isla, and the promise is that, as Pat McFadden outlined today, said on the radio ahead of this, it will save 3.5 hours of teachers' workload every week. It will, quotes, give them back their Sunday afternoons. Now, all right, the public sector and the private sector are two very different things. But I'm not so naive as to think that anybody staring at labour-saving innovation is immediately going to think, oh, that'll be great, because they'll be able to focus on what's important. The first thought that will occur to people
I'm gonna lose my job.
Is, right, we could, if it's saving a third of their time, we can get rid of a third of them. And there are going to be lots of job losses associated with it.
And not wrongly, because the thing that annoyed me most about this is that actually the implications of this technology, which are still revealing themselves day by day, are vast and require more than one excitable speech.
Yeah.
Right? Which is like, wow, I've discovered computing. It's amazing what they can do.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can print out what you've written.
Yeah.
And I thought there were lots of things. I mean, AI raises huge questions about, there's a constant reassurance that it will create new jobs. But actually, to be fair, unusually to Elon Musk, when he did that excruciating interview with Rishi Sunak, he said, well, maybe not, actually. No, it may replace most jobs.
It will. Listen, I can tell you, I was out at dinner with somebody on Saturday night and I asked them what had happened to a mutual acquaintance of ours who was the guy that launched Mail Online, right? And had left Mail Online 3 years ago. And was told, oh, he's working on an AI version of Mail Online.
Right.
Right. Of course he is. Makes perfect sense.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Will require no journalists whatsoever. The legal sector, where most conveyancing, next time you move a house, will you be paying 1,200 quid to a solicitor to do all the drawing up? No, you won't.
Or a will, which you can get for about 50 quid online.
Legal sector will be decimated. Journalism will be decimated.
Absolutely.
We're seeing it already in big
This is the problem
groups.
Is that we still are programmed to think of, when people talk about new technology getting rid of jobs, everyone assumes we're talking about blue-collar jobs. Oh, no, that's a 20th century concern. I mean, I'm sure more blue-collar jobs will go. Yeah. But the thing that's going to make this a major assault upon the social contract again and the social fabric is that it's going to affect white-collar jobs as much as blue-collar jobs. And I felt that his speech was glib about all that.
I thought it was glib to the point of being deceitful,
and offensively so, because
there's another side to it, and he should be honest about it.
Well, I mean, there's another side to it, because even the people that are doing it are the best people. You'll notice always are the ones that are most honest about the fact that they don't know exactly where it's going.
Exactly right.
You know, and there are huge questions about which hundreds of thousands of hours have already been spent, debating about data privacy, about surveillance. Massive question, not least the racist elements of AI-driven surveillance, about energy use. I mean, AI uses energy use on a scale extraordinarily.
I checked this out because I read the whole of Peter Carl's the minister who's in charge of executing all this, and I read his lengthy report, which is based on the McGriffith recommendations. Again, excellent recommendations. But Peter Kyle's report has then got the political spin on top of it, and the the kind of convenient shortcutting of language that makes a mockery of detailed scientific research from Clifford, and talks about, this will lead to the regeneration of post-industrial areas.
Says why?
It won't. What it will lead to is massive server farms in places that have been run down. But if people in those run down places are thinking, that's great, we're all going to be AI engineers, you're not. You're going to have massive server farms in industrial estates that have no longer...
The AI engineers probably won't even be on mainland Britain.
The challenge that we're facing as a country, Keir Starmer said we're third in the race behind China.
But we're a long way behind.
I mean, it's like Usain Bolt has already crossed the finish line and we've just got out the blocks.
Yeah.
Of the 500...
In our brogues.
The 500 supercomputers, right, or the top 500 supercomputing facilities in the world, we've got 12 of them in the top 500.
Yes.
China's got 214 and the States has got 100 and something.
Gives you an idea.
China is...
It's a two-horse race at the moment.
And we're talking about wrestling with regulation and doing it our way. They're not wrestling so much in Beijing with regulation. They are
and
tearing
also,
ahead.
They don't declare themselves an AI superpower in Beijing. They just are one.
Exactly.
And I mean, another aspect to this, which I thought was disingenuous, again, to use your word, to the point of deceit, was that he said several times that he said he was going to, plug AI into the bloodstream.
Mainline into our bloodstream.
All these terrible cliches. Actually, quite Boris Johnson during the COVID sort of language.
But also, it's a strange vocabulary to pick up because it's the languge of train spotting. It's like
it is
heroin injection.
It is absurd. But I mean, he was implying that a lot of efficiency gains, to use the Whitehall phrase, which is to say savings, are going to be found very quickly in the public sector through AI.
Yeah.
Well, hold on a second. One of the things, again, one of the nuances in all this is that when a private sector company uses AI, it's just using AI. But when the public sector uses AI to disrupt an existing public service body with its own ethos and its own traditions and so on, the results have historically been disastrous.
Yes.
I mean, as a couple of people have pointed out today already, post office, anyone? The use of technology in the post office was, shall we say, suboptimal. Because what happens is that the management say, look, this is going to be efficient, it's going to save you a lot of work, and it's going to save us, the company, money. What are you complaining about? And then 15 years down the line, everyone wonders why all the kids have been taught that there are 56 letters in the alphabet, no one can add up, and all of the records at the GPs have been lost. So I'm extremely concerned, and this, I guess, will lead us at some point onto the second point, the broader economic context, that a lot of this is going to be rushed into use in order to make sort of performative savings in the public sector.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my conviction on this, and I should make it absolutely clear, AI is coming whether anybody likes it or not.
Oh, yeah.
AI will come and influence all of our lives, whether it's developed and optimized on these shores or on any other shores, and the likelihood it will be optimized by US or Chinese companies. I mean, we should be grateful that DeepMind, one of the great innovative AI companies, is still based down the road in King's Cross.
Yeah, no, we haven't
owned by Google now.
We haven't got that
British
many
company.
British owned, but we've got quite a lot of British-based AI.
So loads of great expertise, and Starmer's right to say that this nation has got a very proud. We invented the World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee.
And Alan Turing actually is the crucial figure here.
But still, they're probably great examples or illustrations of how we can innovate, but we are helpless at controlling stuff. And it's like the weather. You can't.
We innovate and then others capitalize upon it.
And that's fine. That's the way of the world.
Yeah, it is. But that speech today demonstrated exactly why there is a long history of Brits innovating and then somehow the financial gain and the cultural gains going elsewhere. And I did sort of think, I was trying to work out whether he believes it, because he clearly doesn't really know what he's talking about. I sense, I don't know if you agree, a creeping desperation in his voice.
Yeah.
I think he's not so stupid that he doesn't realise he's in trouble.
He looked at the questions. Body
Yes.
language counts for a lot. He looked startled.
He
some
looked
of them.
startled and aphasic, and although every single one of the questions was entirely predictable,
Yeah.
and one assumes he had talking points on all of them,
Yeah.
but he certainly gave the impression of being, a bunny in the headlights,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
And I think that there was something desperately wrong with it, because this is, of course, any head of government right now should be delivering speeches, plural, about what AI means, if partly to reassure people that about the undoubted things that will worry them.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about, is it going to turn into Skynet, like
Yeah.
in the Terminator movies? Is it going to become conscious? And that is a legitimate concern. But to be honest with you, the immediate concerns are to do with jobs. That I think for most people will be the top one.
Yeah.
Quality of service,
Yeah.
quality of information, which we talked about last week.
Misuse of data is going to be a massive concern.
That was sort of brushed aside as if it was but I mean,
in Kyle's report,
Yes.
Peter Kyle's report, it makes it clear that one of the things they're proposing to do to attract AI startups to these shores is to be the best state partner there can be, and that means
Sovereign data.
providing proprietary data, health data, to these companies to work with. Now
Yes.
that opens up all sorts of ethical questions.
Huge ones, because the sell is, don't worry, it'll be anonymized, right? Well, that's not enough, because actually the health is so individual.
Yeah.
And in fact, literally, will as technology gets more specific, and we've seen with gene therapy and DNA therapy that we will now have literal maps of each individual patient. The data they have upon them will be personalized and will be matchable to an individual. Now, I'm not saying there aren't ways of getting around that, and I do understand the appeal of having data sets available for use, because it, as you say, Matt, it makes this attractive to investors. What I didn't like, though, was the way that this was sort of dealt with in a subordinate clause.
That's right.
You're talking about essentially opening the books of the NHS to the highest bidder.
I also noticed, Matt, that Unison, right? Now, obviously, Labour is heavily influenced by the union movement.
Yes.
Unison came straight out and said, listen, yes, AI is coming, but we've got to focus on the effect on our members, on our jobs. And there's going to be a lot of this in the next 6 months, 12 months.
And watch out, because it won't just be Unison. It'll be the FDA, the Civil Service Union.
Yeah.
It'll be the legal bodies. It'll be... before long, it'll be the medical colleges, right? Yeah. And rightly so. Here's a sort of, for instance, that someone, a surgeon told me about actually last year, which is there's a lot of talk now, and it's quite well advanced, of if you have a significant operation, the consultant will be the attending and will be doing the main thing. The person who would have been the junior doctor will be a machine.
Yeah.
And he said, so the sell on that is it's half the price of the old-fashioned surgery, right? And he said that, which sounds great until you remember that I'm going to retire in 10 years, and who's going to take my place?
Right.
So in other words, now that's just a very narrow example, but the pipeline of old-fashioned careers, which I'm sure those who can't get up in the morning without saying the word disrupt would say is a terribly old and stupid idea, right? Okay, fine. But what are you going to do when that guy's gone and all you've got left is the AI, device stroke machine? Are you saying that becomes the consultant? Because that involves judgment.
Yeah.
And he didn't even mention really the incredibly delicate issue, which has become vivid in the most horrible way in Gaza, of drones.
Right.
Because a lot of the attacks when the history of this conflict is written, one of the things that I hope is looked into with, absolutely forensic, laser-like precision is how much autonomy did these drones have? Because there's a school of thought among some military thinkers, which is actually it's good to have AI that doesn't have a conscience, as it were. Or rather, it has a conscience, but it doesn't sort of hold off. You know, it doesn't see, it thinks, right, there are 20 people in that building and there's 2 terrorists. That's a reasonable ratio, right? Whereas if you or I were operating that, as most human-operated drones are, and you saw someone that reminded you of one of your children, you might hold off, right? Now, the military thinking is that's a weakness.
Yeah.
To my mind,
that's a positive.
In a world of humanity, that's although it may not be militarily ideal, I like that element in the mix, right? But again, all I'm saying, and this is straying from the point about Starmer's speech, but I'm saying all of these were glossed over.
Yeah. It was presented as though it was unmitigated good news.
Yes, and
it's not.
As if it was all new, right? And B, as if everything in it was, if there were some wrinkles to be ironed out, they were really nothing that a couple of task force could do. And actually what he was essentially unveiling was the biggest technological shift in the world from Labour's point of view as a government since the web, and probably bigger.
He presented it as though we'd just discovered a new colony that was full of riches.
Yeah, exactly.
And we were going to colonise it, instead of the reality, which is how it should have been presented. And again, to say, there's so many positive things about what AI can do for society that this isn't a tirade against AI or all of the wonderful companies that will come and make great things and change our lives positively. Fantastic. What this is a tirade about, if it's a tirade, is about the way it was, the naivety with which it was presented.
Yes, I mean, I'm afraid it absolutely entrenched all of my worst reflections upon Keir Starmer as a leader.
Let me tell you one thing, Matt, which I discovered, because I read, as I said,
you read the
whole Peter Kyle thing, and towards the bottom, a figure hit me in the face. It said, AI has the potential to improve the UK economy by £400 billion by 2030. Right. And I went to check my calendar and I thought, yes, it is. They are only talking about 5 years away.
Yes.
£400 billion. I thought, well, gosh, that sounds like a lot of money, but maybe the UK economy is well, the UK economy is 2.5 trillion, so 2,500. So they're saying, they're talking about a 12% of the UK economy improvement through AI, right?
Yes.
Within 5 years. So then the journalist within me said, bullshit, right?
Obviously it's bullshit.
I wondered where that figure had come from.
Where did it come from?
It was footnoted. It comes from a press release from a company called Public First, which used to be a Tufton Street outfit, right? This PR company, in 2023, right, so it's 18 months old, this news. In 2023, they did a survey of a couple of thousand people on behalf of Google and produced a report saying Google's impact on the UK economy in 2023. Dear. And within the précis of this report, which is publicly available, is this figure in the third paragraph saying, if everyone adopted all of Google's spreadsheets and blah, 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 and all of this, it could save 700,000 hours a year, which equates to £400 billion. So in other words, this £400 billion growth in the economy from AI, which Peter Kyle has included in the report, it comes from some
Tufton
baloney, right-wing Tufton Street baloney on behalf of
he
Google.
may as well have said 30 magic beans.
Exactly right. And this gets to the heart.
By the way, it'd probably be nearer the truth. Yeah.
This gets to the heart of my problem with the way this has been approached. You used the word rushed earlier. And whether it's been rushed or not, I think it has a lack of credibility. I'm not an AI expert, but
you're not meant to be.
I'm smart enough to do some Googling and wonder, hang on, that sounds like bullshit. Oh, yes, it is bullshit. But it's there in Peter Kyle's official document about the UK's approach to AI. Now, they've got to. Now, as I left the house, I said all of this to my wife, and she said, "Oh, for God's sake, give him a chance," right? And I thought, I'd love to give them a chance, and I want to give them a chance, but they've got to be better at this.
Yes, they've got to be a lot better. I also want to say, leading into part two, as it were, why I think he should have postponed this speech. Shall we take a break?
Let's take a very quick break and come back and address this.
What can an object tell us about the conflicts that have shaped our world? Conflict of Interest is the podcast that invites celebrity guests to Imperial War Museum London for a carefully curated tour of our most revealing artefacts. Join Cerys Matthews, Phil Wang, Eddie Izzard, Jamali Maddox, Kerry Mulligan and more as they get to grips with the history of Afghanistan, the Malayan emergency or the Vietnam War. That's Conflict of Interest from Imperial War Museums. Series 3 out now.
So, Matt, we ended part one about why
we didn't like the speech itself.
And you suggested he should have postponed it.
For this reason, which is that it was obviously meant to be, I'm not sure it could have been, but it was meant to be a big panoramic vision for AI in the UK. In context, it became a sort of desperate attempt to answer the government's entirely topical, contemporary economic predicament.
Yes.
A sort of magic wand for saving Rachel Reeves as she arrived back from China to the markets, causing her all sorts of problems. And this is exactly what Starmer has said endlessly was wrong with Rishi Sunak and his predecessors, that the sticking plaster politics.
Yeah.
And it was a massive misuse, I felt, of AI and a massive misrepresentation of AI, because one thing that is for certain, and you actually heard this on broadcast and podcasts and so forth during the day, was anyone with any knowledge of AI was saying, look, it may well be that in 10 years' time, we will be in a position where AI is a serious growth generator if we're lucky, but it involves massive investment, massive infrastructure. And so the idea that this is going to help the government with its present fiscal crisis is just a total misrepresentation of the technology. Yeah. And I think there you stray from, it was an unsatisfactory speech which fell flat and didn't really address the nature of the and the potential and the dangers of the technology, into its total misuse.
Yes.
Because and this brings us into what I think we thought we'd be talking about today, which is the problems that Rachel Reeves as a reforming Chancellor faces, and they are now critical. Yeah, it seems to me. Last week we talked about the way the Treasury had intervened to calm the markets because long-term interest rates were getting more and more overheated because it was costing more to service and will cost more to service the country's debts, reaching the highest level since 1998. The prices of bonds are falling. And why is this? In sum, it's because the markets don't have confidence in Rachel Reeves' plan.
So, and just to put the predicament into small words, all the extra money she thought she had raised to do all the things they wanted to do, the fiscal headroom, has been eaten up by the increased cost of borrowing because the markets don't believe that she's got the vision for the future. So it's a very circular predicament.
It is. And, let's just sort of go back the story so far, because it's important, I think. Pre-election, Starmer before the election, and again, this is his claims about pace. He said, and he was talking about how it was going to be stability and growth, and he said, this is just before the election, we think that this can happen very quickly. Within months of a Labour government, we can turn this around and get the investment that we need. Just after the election, he talks about stability, the days after the election, and says, we'll get stability to ensure that we can bring mortgages down. Now, that's precisely to talk about what's going on, not in FT terms, but in terms of what ordinary folk will be thinking about this means. As things stand, your mortgages are going to go up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not to speak of the fact that inflation may well continue to rise and growth may continue to be pretty flat.
Because there are lots of mortgage holders whose deals are going to renew in the next 12 months.
And move on to variable rate.
And they're going to get hammered.
And they're going to get really hammered. Yeah. And we're not yet necessarily in early 90s negative equity territory, but we are entering a point where the price of borrowing is going to be significantly higher than we were promised by Labour. And so July, Reeves made the famous speech saying the Tories had left with a £22 billion black hole. And at the time I thought, well, okay, she's allowed one shot at it was all the Tories' fault. Okay. But that's remained the theme. And we heard it again in that answer at the top of the programme about, how much better Labour is than the Tories, given what the Tory inheritance was and all the rest of it. In September, Reeves says there's going to be no return to austerity. In October, her first budget, she introduces 40 billion quid's worth of tax increases, including the very controversial national insurance rises on employers, which in a lot of people's view broke an election pledge. So have we got the growth that we were promised? No, we haven't. I mean, the forecasts at the moment are basically flatlining.
Yeah. And this, even today, Keir Starmer opened his thing by saying, my big criticism of the Tories is that we had no growth.
Right, well...
But that's what the OBR looked at the budget and said, there's no growth in here. And they carried on with it regardless.
So she said to the CBI in November, Rachel Reeves, I do not plan to have another budget like this. I've wiped the slate clean. So that leads to the question, what does that mean? She says she doesn't want to break her fiscal rules, and Starmer was very keen to emphasise that with 3 underlinings today.
Well, and the consequence of him not doing that would have been to absolutely blow the markets apart.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're in Liz Truss territory.
I mean, he had, to be fair, he had to. But the key, there are 3 fiscal rules, but the most important one of them is that the current budget should be on course to be in balance by 2029-30, which is to say, you have to either raise taxes or cut spending or borrow. And you can't borrow much more.
Or hope that 400 billion comes down the magic money tree.
Exactly. So then you get to this morning's Telegraph, or was it yesterday? I can't remember, which revealed a letter that landed on cabinet ministers' desks in December from Darren Jones, the chief secretary, ordering, and I quote, ruthless prioritisation over spending. And here we are, I think we've finally landed at where this is all heading.
Yeah.
Because whilst I actually think she might have to raise taxes again, there's so much pressure on them from the investment community and the CBI not to, that I think, I mean, I don't know what you feel, but my sad feeling is that where this is heading is welfare cuts.
Right. And the irony, Matt,
I know.
irony that the first government, first Labour government in 14 years will be the one slashing the welfare like this. And that is austerity. That's taking
it really
back
is.
into
it. They're obviously going to try and get more bang for your buck in the NHS, and Wes Streeting is committed to that. But they're also not, that's their sort of flagship.
Yeah.
They've got to spend more on defence, especially in a Trump world.
Yeah.
And if you look at the big tickets, the one where they're just by a process of elimination, sort of Occam's razor, they're bound to, and indeed have indicated in various leaks to the press, that it's going to be welfare they target. Now, there's a sort of cycle to this, which is what happens is ministers go on the Today programme or whatever it might be and say, well, we're actually, what we really want to do is get people back to work who can work. And that sounds great.
Yeah.
Who would be against that?
Yeah.
But invariably what happens is that an already distressing process is made more distressing for those who are trying to apply for it. And people who are genuinely incapacitated or permanently disabled find themselves subjected to the most demeaning repetitive tests. And actually the savings at the end of the day, after all the fuss, are negligible.
Yeah.
But to your point, the sad fact is that here we are 6 months into the Labour government that promised change and growth.
Yeah.
And I think that's what she'll do. And Paul Mason our colleague, the great Paul Mason, wrote a very good piece for us, saying that she'd have to do a bit of quantitative easing, which is printing money.
Yeah.
So there's money is cheaper, there's more money supply. And maybe she might do that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, Paul is much more economically literate than I could have hoped to be.
Yeah.
But I do feel that what we always hope there'd be a theory of the case, didn't we? We hoped there'd be a sort of Rooseveltian New Deal kind of feel to this government. And that's not what I'm feeling.
It seems mired in like a quicksand of its own making. And the guy from the CBI this morning on the radio,
Rupert Soames.
Is he any relation?
Yes, he's Churchill's grandson. I know him.
So is he Nicholas Soames's
brother?
Is he really?
Yes.
Anyway, very articulate.
Good DJ.
Really?
Yeah.
Good DJ.
Very good DJ.
In what regard?
He just is.
What, he plays music?
Yeah, I've heard him.
Really?
He's a very good DJ.
And he's the boss of the CBI as well.
I've been to Glastonbury with him.
Extraordinary. We must get him on the podcast.
Oh, he would be great. He's a really, really funny and good man.
Really? Anyway, well,
yeah.
I'll take
Excellent
your word
man.
on it. Absolutely.
No,
and he was very, very
very
socially,
very socially liberal, very
brilliant.
Knows all about music, loves it.
Amazing. All right. Well, we must get him on the podcast. Come on.
He's tremendous.
But he said this phrase about has confidence been wiped out? And he said it's not been wiped out, but the business community feels very bruised.
Yes.
And again, the messaging. Alistair Campbell doesn't need smoke blowing up his backside, but
You quite like it though.
Where is the Alistair Campbell of today to sit down with Keir and say this is a shit show, right? We need corrective action right now. You need to think about Rachel Reeves' future because that's going in one direction only. You need to distance yourself from her. You can't just keep saying, oh, she's got my full confidence because that's pathetic.
But not answering. I mean, the problem is that he won't answer because I suppose he technically can't. Will she be the Chancellor at the next election?
Yeah. Well, he did with David Lammy, though.
Yes.
He gave Lammy.
That's a fair point.
Be there
actually.
for 5 years.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. So I'm afraid I read that was the black spot for Rachel Reeves.
Yeah.
When a prime minister says they have full confidence in you, it's time to go to LinkedIn.
Yeah. But don't start the great big future about the story about a woman who's just recovered from a stroke. Don't start your government by telling everybody it's going to get extremely difficult and then prove them right.
Yes, I know, absolutely.
You don't do all these negative things. Sell us a vision and don't call it missions, milestones, goal posts and whatever, whatever else nonsense.
I heard something about Starmer, which I thought was very interesting, which is that when he was a barrister, he was regarded as possibly the best in the business when it came to making an argument before a judge.
Right.
My client, the following points, here's the precedents, totally in command of his brief. Absolutely meticulous, intelligent, cerebral argument, right? In front of a jury, he was useless.
Right.
Because he would say, my father was a toolmaker and my defendant is innocent. He just, that extra empathy gene is missing. And I think you see that. Today, he was desperately trying to appear enthused, and he came across to me like he came across to me like Skynet from the Terminator had sent him back through time to try and persuade us that only robots can be our overlords now because human beings are not fit to be prime minister. I mean, he just doesn't have I mean, it's cruel to say it, but it's a cruel business, politics. He just doesn't have the leadership gene at a moment when, I mean, there are moments in history when you can not coast, but you can get away with technocracy and Starmerism. But there's not one of them.
The truth is, we can talk about what's Morgan McSweeney's role in
Chief
all
of
of
Staff.
this, and what's is Wes Streeting the next guy,
or Angela Rayner,
the
buck stops with him.
But the truth is that it all comes from all of this doubt and speculation and disappointment comes from the top.
Yes.
He's responsible for it.
He is cautious, piecemeal, and technocratic in his delivery because that's what he thinks is the right way to do it. And I submit to the court that is finished with. I mean, there was a crazy. We all in the T&E group chat. We all lit upon it. There was a crazy piece in the Financial Times by Peter Thiel, who's a sort of famous Silicon Valley tech investor and one-time mentor of Elon Musk. And it is a deranged piece arguing about how we were now entering a techno-utopia and all the rest of it. But he did get one thing right, which was it's time to accept, for good or ill, that Biden's re-election or Biden's election in 2020 was the aberration.
Yeah.
And that something has shifted, and that we are now living in a world where the right is resurgent. There are huge social and technological challenges ahead, not to speak of climate change, like Los Angeles. And we need progressive leaders of vision and audacity and just a touch of recklessness.
Yeah.
And he is the polar opposite of that.
Yeah, yeah. And also he's bold, for my money, right? He's bold in all the wrong places. You know,
That's a great way of putting it, yeah.
It's like, you know, the bits that he's sort of brave and dogmatic about, saying, you know, we won't be going back to the European Union. We definitely,
yes,
you know,
we
can rule
definitely
out
won't be
single
doing that
market.
good thing.
Well, Sadiq Khan made a speech on, I don't know, was it Friday night? Anyway, I want to say Friday night. But it was about Brexit's effect on the City of London.
Yeah, he's been very good on that.
And, you know, the research that they've done,
the figures are terrifying.
290,000 fewer jobs in London today because of Brexit.
Yeah.
3 million fewer jobs in the UK as a whole because of Brexit. Absolutely decimated the financial and construction sectors. It's fueling food price inflation. Everybody in the country, £2,000 a year worse off. And if you happen to live in London, £3,500 worse off today a year because of Brexit. Now, AI is a great thing and it's got all this potential and all this business, but it's not mutually exclusive with other bolder solutions. One of which would be, you know, let's, for God's sake, swallow some pride and really go to the European Union with intent.
Well, I mean, here was an opportunity missed spectacularly, because actually, although the EU's been quite good on social media regulation, it's been terrible on AI development. Really bad. Germany has not really had a proper tech startup for decades, okay? So we are, or were, the leader of AI in the EU.
Yeah.
Which is a very good position to be in, because that says to the world, right, there are basically three blocks. There's China, America, and Europe.
Yeah.
Kind of, you know, Oceania.
Yeah.
And we were top dog in the European bloc on AI.
Yeah.
Now that's something to have, because you're saying we're the AI hub in this massive single market.
Yeah.
Now you're talking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas what we're actually saying is we're a small offshore island, and we promised to build enough compute and data centers by the year 2050. Please come here, right? It's really like Silicon Valley, no, honestly, which is insane, because the way to draw, if you're talking about talent as well as invest pounds, is to say, come here and be part of Europe.
Yeah.
Come and, you know, build your data center in Sunderland or London or Cardiff or wherever. And also go to Milan for the weekend and, you know, go to... You see my point?
It's I totally see it. I don't know why, but I'm reminded of that, for some reason, I'm reminded of that wonderful John Lennon response to the question when asked, John, would you say Ringo Starr's the best drummer in the world? And he said, Ringo Starr's not the best drummer in the Beatles.
Yeah.
And it kind of, Britain still feels we're not even the best at AI within our, you know, in the United Kingdom. It's kind of, it feels like we have traded a preeminent space for second-rate meaninglessness, you know.
Well, we were going to be, until the terrible decision, I think, the leaders of Europe's AI policy. And by the way, I think Europe has suffered from our absence from those discussions, because there is more innovation and entrepreneurialism as regards AI in this country. But it needs to be attached onto the motherlode of European economic might and freedom of movement and so on to mean anything. And I think that what you see, what I fear so much when I hear Starmer speak about anything, but particularly when he's addressing one of the sort of big 21st century themes, and this is big, is how small it feels. You know, this is, whatever you thought about Thatcher when she was talking about Big Bang in the 80s, you felt, wow, you know, we are leading the financial services in this competitive block.
Yeah.
You know, and Blair, likewise, when he was doing his reforms, you felt Britain is leading. Britain is now the hinge between the American, the Atlantic world, and the European world, and that was a great place to be.
Yeah.
Today, I felt there's a man who is just longing to say one day tools will be made by AI, like my father. Somehow there's a kind of there's a minlism to it.
It feels parochial.
There's a provincialism.
It's
Exactly.
parochial.
Yeah.
And you know, I as listeners will be tired of hearing me say, I grew up in a city that was a victim of geography. Liverpool, you know, at one stage Liverpool was born on geography because it was on the right side.
It was
on the right side of the country.
Port cities of the world.
But then suddenly it wasn't.
Yeah.
And everything was European Union facing, you know, and suddenly Liverpool felt, well, literally redundant in so many ways.
I mean, the Beatles were a product of that internationalism.
Of the internationalism. And now Liverpool is resurgent and wonderful, you know, thanks to the European Union in great part. But there's an analogy there with the British Isles. Ireland, funnily enough, is the thing that proves the benefit of being part of the whole.
And it's no accident that a lot of tech firms have gone to Dublin.
Yeah.
Because Ireland understands exactly what we've just been talking about, which is it's great to be a place that offers a sort of hospitable home for technology firms. And it's even better if you're part of this huge single market.
And also have proven over the course of decades that it's perfectly possible to have divergent fiscal policies to European Union partners. The kind of thing that Nigel Farage and all the rest of the liars said you can't do. Well, you can.
You know, I know people think we always go on about Brexit, and we do, but there's a reason for that. When, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've noticed that Brexit has had a sort of corrosive effect upon political language. So when Starmer said that we were going to be AI makers, not AI takers, I thought, oh, Jesus Christ, this is lawmakers, not law takers, but transposed to technical sphere, right? It's like we're so used to talking this Brexitese rubbish, right? Yeah. That we're starting to apply it to technology.
And just as lawmakers and law takers is bollocks, AI makers and AI takers,
meaningless.
That's also bollocks, because there's actually a great case for saying, well, don't be first adopters. Don't be the guys who are spending all the money on investment. Just assimilate and copy. You know?
Yes, and also what does AI takers mean? I mean, are you saying you're not going to use ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok? Is that what I mean? What are you saying? In fact, it's one of those completely meaningless assertions, and I do think that that's what's so worrying, is that he governs by assertion. You know. Before the election, when the slogan was just change, I kind of thought, no, hold on, you know, it's the word, people do want to change. When he gets elected, 1,000 flowers will bloom. And then the word changed from change to growth. And I thought, no, he's going to reveal the way the growth is going to, and then it was just fixing the foundations. And again, and there was so much of this on view today at the press conference, it's all the Tories' fault. Yeah. No, I mean, what is happening in the markets at the moment is not a response to the Tories. It's not. It's a response to lack of confidence in this government's fiscal and economic plan. Yeah. And that may be unfair, but the markets are not driven by fairness. They're driven by, actually, they're driven by animal spirits, which is, you know, deeply unjust often. But that's the way it works.
Look, again, we have been staunchly critical of Keir Starmer's government, but again, dear listener, it's coming from a good place, which is we so desperately want this country to get back on the up.
And this country is more important than this government. Yeah. Right? Yeah. You know, and subjects like AI, you know, I'd love to get Matt Clifford on the program. You know, I not particularly interested in what Keir Starmer, or though I have a high regard for him in other spheres, Peter Kyle has to say about AI.
Yeah. I'd rather get it from the horse's mouth.
Exactly. I'd rather get it from someone who actually understands the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah.
But it has, this is a terrible, to say start is ridiculous because AI has been around for so long, but this was a wretched day. It was a wretched day.
It reminded me, what was that thing that Rishi Sunak came out one? Do you remember there was like a 5 p.m. Friday Downing Street press conference?
Was that the net zero
wasn't it zero tolerance on policing or something like this?
Probably.
Yeah, but he came out. There was one Friday. Do you remember? There was
came out
at
into
3 o'clock.
Everyone thought it was going to be election. That was the point.
And it was like, oh my God.
It's an election.
There's some like a huge announcement coming. And he came out and he announced this. It was a bizarre kind of random speech about, I think it was, something about policing and security. We won't tolerate this and all that bollocks, And then a week later, it had been completely forgotten. Everyone had moved on. The government had moved on. And it just looked like a guy who had stood in a storm and sort of shouted at the weather to stop.
Mr. Speaker.
And it was utterly ineffective. And my prediction on what we've seen today is that it'll get subsumed by some other desperate announcement in 2 months' time.
Look,
and AI will dissipate within the government departments.
The sole mission of the government this week is to save Rachel Reeves.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right. So on that nose, what are her chances? Prediction, will she be Chancellor of the Exchequer for the next budget? Let's put it like that.
Certainly the next budget, yeah.
She will?
Yes.
Right. I wonder.
But I'm reasonably certain she won't be Chancellor at the next election.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think that the problem with being a Chancellor is that if you're damaged goods, you just are damaged goods.
Yeah.
And her defenders in the press, of whom there are some, have been saying today, what's the effect of, oh, come on, her inheritance is so terrible. And but that's what she signed up to. And she also signed up to saying that and she and Starmer said repeatedly the growth would start very quickly and that there would be change very quickly, and it hasn't come. And all the forecasts suggest it isn't going to come. And in that is ingrained a terrible, terrible outcome for the progressive cause, which is much more important than any of us.
That's my point, mate, is that as you said, it's more important than this government, because the next government will be led by one N Farage if things shape up like this.
I'm afraid, another good day for N Farage.
Yeah. So my prediction is that she won't last as long as you suggest. I think people in number 10 will be panicking.
They will.
They are. I think Morgan McSweeney will be looking at the financial forecasts and will be saying the only thing anyone can remember about this bloody government is slashing winter fuel things and our promise of growth.
And the tractor tax.
And the tractor tax. Even that.
That's kind of been forgotten.
But growth. We've hammered it so much.
The winter fuel allowance.
Growth has to happen. And if it doesn't happen, she's got to go.
And also, if they do replace her, they need to replace her with someone who genuinely understands the difficulty and the risks you have to take to turbocharge an economy.
Yeah.
I mean, her plan clearly was stability will, as she kept saying, stability will yield a kind of inward rush of investment so that by this spring it will be happy days. And it's just that was never going to happen, and it's alarming that it got this far.
Yeah.
But I hear what you say. I mean, it depends what you mean by the next budget. So I certainly think she'll make it to the spending review in June. Will she make it to the budget in later in the year? Possibly not. Possibly not.
Right. Well, anyway, I hope that has shed some light on.
Sorry to be gloomy, folks, but because we are optimists, we have to be realists too.
Yeah, and I think I just wish there was a bit of that tone in the government's delivery.
Yes.
optimism with reality.
it's that old...
Optimism underpinned by reality is not
Yeah.
a bad strategy, is it?
Yeah, and also it's that old American saying, which is before you go out, do check what day it is. You know, this is 2025, Keir.
Yeah.
It's not 1982.
Yeah. Right. Do subscribe to The New European. It helps us produce these podcasts, and I hope they entertain you. So,
And it's not done by AI.
it's not done
Not yet.
Well, it won't ever be. But I mean, on a serious point, a lot of media is going to get done by AI. So hopefully, original, thoughtful journalism will be worth paying
I
for
think
in the
that
future.
media done by AI will be absolute bollocks.
Yeah. Well, I am just off to a meeting, drinks tonight with a company called Pro Rata AI or something like that. And they're a LA company who are involved in helping publishers get license fees from things like OpenAI. So
Right.
hopefully there will be some kind of payback for people who are creating original content.
Yes, the New York Times is suing various of the companies,
But the
aren't
best
they?
way to pay back original journalism is to
To pay for it.
subscribe and pay for it, please. And I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll give you a free bottle of El Rayo tequila when you subscribe while stocks last.
Real tequila, not artificial tequila.
No, proper tequila. You may wake up feeling artificially intelligent after a dose of El Rayo tequila. But
ChatGPT.
it is good stuff, believe me, as is The New European. So subscribe. Go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats. That's the number 2, MATTS. There's a link in the show notes. Send in your questions, please, for our Q&A on Sunday, which will be preceded by our podcast on Thursday, which we look forward to seeing
looking
you
forward to it.
on. Thanks as ever to our production team led by Matt Hill at Rethink Audio.
And until then, have a great week.
Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye.